Should the new Delves feature award mythic level gear, just like, in raids and dungeons? Hey, it's Soul, and in the wake of the War Within announcement for World of Warcraft, the winds are sort of starting to shift. This upcoming expansion, is going to change the way that we define endgame, as I've always talked about the big three: organized raids, Mythic Plus, dungeons, and organized PvP, which require grouping and a level of coordination between you and your fellow comrades. In the War Within, we're going to get this thing called Delves, a small group or even solo experience to give a more difficult adventuring feel in the outdoor world. Today we're going to not talk about what Delves are, because we don't really know all that much about them yet. And I want to be clear, you're not going to learn anything new that hasn't already been announced. But what I do want to discuss is what we get from these Delve things. In their announcements, Delves are going to be a part of this new pillar of world content gameplay that's meant to be just about as rewarding as the previous big three, but it falls a little bit short. In a nutshell, we can expect in the War Within, when a new week rolls along, folks who just do outdoor content, including Delves, will be able to look at their Great Vault and, depending on what they did, receive up to heroic level gear, or hero class gear in Dragonflight. It narrows the gap so much closer between, forgive me for the crude language, the casuals and the sweaties. But there are some who want that gap to go away entirely. They suggest that mythic gear ought to be accessible to everyone, regardless of their playstyle. So I'm here to put a spotlight on this argument and talk about why this isn't such a bad idea, and why it is a bad idea. And then you can decide for yourself where you feel like standing on the issue, and I invite you to share your own takes. We're still a pretty long way off from the expansion launch, so now is really the best time for discussion. So please, if you don't mind, like the video, subscribe for more coverage and commentary, and of course catch me live wherever I'm streaming. And let's first bring up the basic arguments, I guess. You're gonna catch me wearing a lot of different hats, I guess, and being kind of both sidesy, and I'm gonna explain why a little bit towards the end. So why should Delves be a path towards mythic gear? Well, I guess it's because folks deserve to get good gear just as much as any other person who's paying for the game. No one's exactly calling for mythic gear to just be handed over to us on a silver platter, but the opportunity to get to that realm of mythic level gear, it shouldn't be like hard gated. If those big three people are pressured into running Delves for more vault slots, that's their problem, really. But the solution to their problem shouldn't be to deny the best gear to everyone else. Remember, like I said, I'm starting off with really basic arguments that I usually read. And on the other side, why should Delves not be a path to mythic gear? Well, obviously it's because, and this is kind of an oldie, the best gear should come from the hardest content. And no matter how you spin it, Delves in no way, shape, or form are going to really be the hardest content in World of Warcraft. And the fact of the matter is that Blizzard understands that, big three players, they just want to play big three content. They don't want to get forced into side stuff that they're not interested in, especially not every week. Now, to be fair, people who are mostly interested in just raids, they're pretty irritated knowing that they kind of have to do keys to gear faster, and given this choice, they probably would do Delves instead. But the point is, big three players are already supposed to feel this kind of sense of challenge and reward, so when that sense of fulfillment feels threatened, naturally they're going to get defensive. Now again, these are the kind of more crude versions of the arguments. Then there are actually some very good back and forth discussions that help us understand why, at least in the announcement, the devs decided that Delves would only give heroic level gear, not mythic. But of course it leaves the door open for some persuasive arguments. None of the interviews that I've seen so far have gone into specifics as to why the team decided that Delves will stop short of mythic gear, so I'm mostly guessing here. So first, how does one balance something like the way that this sort of gear will be doled out, because folks have been suggesting reasonably that harder versions of delves ought to give better rewards. The language behind that was a little bit murky from their announcements. The official site lightly suggests that there will be harder delves or other world content to eventually unlock heroic level gear from the vault, but we don't know the conditions to unlock vault slots on this particular row. Well, what we see here is just placeholder. Delves are not going to be the only way to open up slots, because then delves would devalue all other outdoor content. So maybe there could be heroic or mythic delves that will eventually unlock these greater rewards. Maybe it'll be like as simple as, oh, you just gotta defeat the world boss to fill up some of your vault slots, and maybe complete all the other weeklies, whatever it is, each week. But anyway, back to this balance conversation. I think of something like Horrific Visions back during Battle for Azeroth patch 8.3, which was just like two kinds of adventures, and in the War Within we're going to get like 13 of these delves. If tougher delves is going to be the path to heroic gear, and then even tougher delves are going to be the path to mythic gear, how do you balance that for solo content? Like, how do you balance that for, say, healers? Should there be a fail check like Horrific Visions or Mythic Plus? Because I can tell you right now, that probably won't go over very well. Like, no doubt, classes with a tank spec, they're going to be laughing their way to all the mythic gear each week, while it would kind of be a crapshoot for the other classes, even with an NPC companion to help them out. I think one of the more common arguments that some make to gatekeep players from getting gear, it's that powerful gear is not exactly needed for what's considered to be comparably non-threatening situations out in the world. Now, I'm no game dev, and you should all think the world is better for it, but I think that designers sort of consider this following example. Like, let's say that it takes, 10 seconds to kill a mob with regular green gear or whatever, and it takes 5 seconds to kill it with heroic level gear, and it takes like 3 seconds to kill it with mythic gear. Now, the difference between 10 seconds and 5 seconds, that's a lot. That's half the time, that's 5 whole seconds. But the difference between 5 seconds and 3 seconds, it's almost half, but it's still only 2 seconds. Like, I guess what I'm trying to say is that there's a bit of a diminishing return in power relative to what it actually means. Let me try to explain this in a different way. I believe that there's a level of power where you ought to feel really strong, and you gotta feel that. And I've observed that going way too beyond that is this feeling where you know that you are more powerful, but it becomes a little bit harder to appreciate that strength, especially if it took like a really tough and extra grind to get there. And there are going to be big problems when some players find that, depending on what the requirements are, they might not be good enough to get to that mythic level track. And as the cherry on top, it's like, hey, you've been working this hard and the season's gonna end soon after that long grind, and it's time to hop back into that hamster wheel and do it all over again. So one would suggest that it's the devs protecting players from themselves, which, depending on where you're standing, can sound really condescending. But here's a time to ask yourself, which is worse? Running out of things to do or burning out trying to do it? Now, for many, if there's a long path to power, players are probably going to walk it. But if players have multiple ults, then okay, that's going to be multiple paths to walk. And one of the worst feelings to have as a player, especially in the World of Warcraft, is for the season to end and you did not complete your goals. Not to say that having long-term goals isn't fun, but when it comes to item level, where the goalpost is shifting at a steady pace, it challenges players to be like, oh man, I really want to work on this one character, but I really want to like level up this other one, but this holiday event, it just started. And I think I'm sort of making an argument to not just let delves give mythic gear, but to give it to them faster, so whoopsie daisy. There's been no exception to this principal rule of the World of Warcraft that power is fleeting. The perception is disrupted by the start of every season and expansion, but what's not fleeting? Transmog appearances. Like, Transmog is forever. And with the way WoW works these days with item level upgrades, one could obtain all of the PvP tints from the different difficulties, from Raid Finder to Mythic, without even needing the Mythic gear. There's a kind of insidiousness with allowing hero class gear to be obtained from the Great Vault by doing just outdoor activities, because all it takes from there are the aspects, or whatever the new equivalent is, to unlock or to transform this gear from the heroic to the mythic appearance, and that's all based on the current rules of the Revival Catalyst. The question is, where does one get aspect crests in the world within? Will they still only be obtainable from mythic raids and high-level keys? Will it be obtainable right away through delves? Would we have to wait for the equivalent 0.5 or 0.7 patches with whatever new world activities, or given from the vault the same way that we bought the worm crest in Season 2 of Dragonflight? Addressing aspect level crests might be the more important question in this entire conversation. And while we're on that subject, we don't know if the War Within is going to follow the Dragonflight formula of patch cadence, but for better or worse, it did work, right? So with that in mind, I've also got to ask, wouldn't Mythic Delve gear kind of disrupt what those mid-season patches have to offer? Like, it would go one of two ways. Either the patches would help players get the aspect crest for unlocking the appearances that you would get from, doing the world content row and getting the gear from that, or the 0.5 or 0.7 patches wouldn't offer gear upgrades at all. It would just be cosmetic stuff, toys, mounts, and so on and so forth, because Delves and the Great Vault already have that handled. And either route seems like it could mostly work. For those who want Mythic gear to be that much more accessible, then, I hear you, I get it. I see ways to go about it, but I see a lot of wrong ways to go about it too that might not achieve the results that we think that they will, because it might mess with how players set goals for their mains and their alts, because it might diminish other sources of gear, not just Mythic Plus and raids, but other zone and patch content that would come later in the season, because players might not even truly notice the difference between hero and myth level gear, especially if appearances can be obtained from max level hero gear. Now, me personally, I can go either way with how Delve gear or this world content row thing from the vault is going to be handled, because I play in a sort of between space. If Delves give mythic gear, I'm going to run them. As of now, Delves give heroic gear and some pretty cool cosmetic stuff, and I will run them, knowing that ultimately it's going to be a path to get these mythic appearances. As for the power from that gear, at least in my head, gear is nothing more than a tool to be used to complete my goals. That's what I'm trying to do. Folks who play with me would confirm that I almost never play at a higher level than I have to, whether it's for gear or transmog, because it's a game, dude. I'm too relaxed for that. And I know that I'm a weird one, but I just don't have the time or I guess the mental bandwidth to stress over whether I can complete my best in slot or even collect all the transmog on time. So I feel comfortable talking my nonsense about this particular subject because, no matter how it goes, there's no downside. But from all this ranting so far, I'm at least coming to understand why the WoW team decided to stick with awarding at best this hero class gear. The big part is the whole upgrade thing. Getting hero class gear is pretty sweet. It's sweeter than what we have right now in Dragonflight. And if the aspect level crests can be obtained from like the vault or in the mid patches as a sort of catch up, that would be the path for a world content player to shoot for across the season. But it wouldn't be so stringent, it wouldn't be so strict. They would still have the bandwidth to switch to alts and do other activities. It's not mythic gear, but it looks like mythic gear, and in my opinion, between the hero gear that is going to be strong and the appearances as a seasonal goal to achieve, it is a step in the right direction. And hey, the WoW team could always relent a little bit more and let myth level gear be accessible after getting feedback in a later patch or a later expansion. In a way, they're just taking one step at a time here. So that's going to wrap things up for me, but now I want to pass these questions off to you. So heroic gear from Delves, is that good? Is it not good enough? Is it too good? I hope that I got the gears turning in ways that you haven't thought of before, but whatever the case, I would love to hear your thoughts. Please like the video, subscribe for more coverage and conversations, and catch me live for a chat. Take care, folks. Stay safe, stay healthy, and stay breezy.